Welcome to the Holy Rebellion. Welcome back to the Holy Rebellion. Today we're going on a little journey with Jayme. Welcome, Jayme. We're grateful to have you with us today.
Hello, Christian. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I love you're just so bright. You're vibrant. I love to see that. You're a joy.
Well, thank you.
Would you just briefly give us a sample of who Jayme is, what you got going on today?
Yes, absolutely. So, my name is Jayme. A lot of people know me as Coach Jayme. I am a mindset transformation coach, certified life coach, and neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. So,
Oh my
I
goodness.
specialize in one on one coaching for men and women all around the world, just training their brain and shifting their perspectives.
Okay, I have to ask. So is that what neuro-linguistic? I can't even say that again.
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Programming. Okay,
Yeah.
what is that?
It's in my opinion, it's a fancy way to just say rewiring the brain. Tactical way to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I've heard that before, typically it's in context of creating habits or overcoming bad habits, addictions, things like that. Is that a focus? Am I on the right trail?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I typically would just even say NLP, but the fact is, if you actually just Google NLP, apparently in the coding world, NLP is far more dominant of an acronym than what it is from the
Ah,
mental world. So you'll be like, wait,
it's
she's
not
all this
helpful.
crazy, vibrant energy, and then she does coding. No, I rewire brains.
Oh, good. And so you mentioned you're in Austin, Texas. Are you focused locally or do you work all over the place?
I have clients, men and women both, all over the world. So not even just to the US. Yes, I am blessed to do all virtual coaching.
Oh, great. Great. So I'd love to dive into that more. But before we get to that point, I want to see how you got there to where you are today. Will you just tell us a little bit about I like to call it your journey to Jesus? How'd you start? How'd you
Yeah.
end up here?
Yes. So I have a very diverse resume personally and professionally. Born and raised in Ohio. I jokingly say I'm a recovering Catholic, where I was in a Catholic church, but came from a broken home. So anger and
Yeah.
alcohol tended to be the leading wisdom teachers in my life. So chaos was something that I knew far too often. And it was in small town, middle of nowhere, Ohio. We even had the bring your tractor to school days. Just, yes, very slow pace of living. And I very much was like the ammunition on how my parents per each other as they're grieving through, obviously, what they're grieving through. And so by the age of 11, I played as many sports as I could and was even in babysitting, anything that I could just avoid being around people. I knew chaos way more than I knew calm because calm meant something bad was about to happen. So that was when
Mm.
my anxiety would kick in. Experienced a whole lot of death in my life. Grandfather died of leukemia when I was 5. One moment, even in particular, that always sticks out is I couldn't go to school one day because a semi driver tipped over and was bleeding out underneath it in front of, like, and I'm just like looking out that at the window.
Oh my gosh. Was this like in
Yeah.
front of
And
your
then,
house or you
yes,
were on the school
yes.
bus?
No, just school
Wow.
bus couldn't even come through, right? It's just like there on
So,
the road.
yeah,
So,
completely inappropriate correlation here, but have you ever seen Napoleon Dynamite?
yes.
There's like that scene in Idaho where the bus is driving by and the farmer's gonna kill his cow. He
Yeah.
just shoots him.
Yeah, that's
S
yeah, similar type of visual, yes.
I'm so sorry.
No, but yeah, so that all happened, and then fast forward to when I was in 8th grade, lost a cousin who was in his 50s to the day after they increased the dosage with the antidepressants, he hung himself. I was just a very angry soul, and my mom was like, "Jayme, like, I'm taking you to the doctor." And so this was before mental health was a big trending thing on social media. And they diagnosed me as depressed. And in a 6-month time span, they tried me on 4 different antidepressants,
How old were you at
which
that time?
13,
13.
13.
Wow.
So, and all of this will circle back here to in a moment. But yeah, so I was on that. And then fast forward to 16, lost 2 of my best friends in a car accident on the same day, which is where my main moment of disconnecting from God happened. Because since it was a small town, the 2 churches that I grew up in, that's where their funerals were. And the songs that were played at their funeral were the same songs I would hear in a normal Sunday mass. And that was the first time that my mom stopped forcing me to go to church because I was naturally very angry with God. And I also didn't tell anybody, but at that age, and I can only say that this was God now, again, being on the other side, but I was like, I'm not going to rely on a pill to get me through this. So I cut myself cold turkey off my antidepressants and then started trying to grieve that journey. I went to hair school. I was in high school and swore I would never be with a man like my father, and started dating the teenage version when I graduated high school. So physical abuse, emotional abuse, cheating,
Yeah.
drugs, alcohol. During this time, I lost friends to murder, suicide, overdose, car accidents, family members to cancer.
Holy cow.
I attempted to end my life on multiple occasions. And so I was just a mess. But the
You've been through some
blessing,
things,
of
Jayme. Can I ask? I've heard
course.
that before that, and I don't know if this is true, but you hear that it's like girls are often attracted to somebody like their father.
Oh,
And
even men too. Like they typically
yeah,
want
like
to
somebody
find
like their
somebody like their
mother.
mother. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's what you know. And random fun fact, only 2 to 3% of our brain is actually our conscious mind, meaning we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day that are happening. Obviously, we're not aware of what those are. So behind the scenes, if what's familiar, your default setting of what's normal, right? Naturally, you're going to gravitate towards that.
Mhm.
Even if it's something that you shouldn't be doing,
So that's
it's where
even
safety is.
subconsciously we're being pulled towards normal.
Yes. Yes. What our default setting of normal is. So, yes.
Yeah.
And so clearly mine was all discombobulated. But yeah, so all those things were happening. But was even, I went to, like I mentioned, went to hair school. I was in high school. So I was doing hair for a living, even doing hair on the deceased. Like the funeral homes would call me up. So I would
Oh
do
yeah.
for that. I was a facilitator for grieving kids due to death of a loved one, all the things. But so I had a lot of moments of just making a lot of wrong decisions, but God was still shining his light there, even though I didn't know it. And then so dabbled in a lot of other careers and all of these different things. Hard Knocks kept presenting life to itself, or even I ended up getting raped at one point. So all that to say, in the midst of some not so healthy vices like drinking, food issues with binge eating disorders and emotional eating. Like I said, the drugs, alcohol was a thing. Relationships with the wrong people were a vice. Slowly, I started making my way back to church. Slowly, I started getting really involved with personal development. And luckily, since I was also always in sports and doing all the things from when I was younger, like staying physically active was always a healthier vice that was there too. But I was constantly running from myself. At that point, it was like, I have nobody who cares about me. I have to take care of everybody else. Otherwise, I'm not loved. And if I'm sitting around doing nothing, I'm just wasting up space. So I need to work as hard as I possibly can and do as much as I can. And so this led to a burnout at the age of 25, where I developed a massive kidney infection and was put on bed rest for an entire week. And that was yet another come to Jesus moment where it was like, hey, what you're doing isn't working. Luckily, we serve a God who will always meet us where we're at. And again, is always there when we are willing to start sending our focus that way. And I started that journey with him. And since then, making it out to the other side. And I'm sure we'll have more conversation from this, but to close this all very quickly, yeah, I ended up just getting closer and closer to him. Where then in February of 2021, I found an amazing church here while being in Texas, where I was able to get rebaptized. And now I
Right.
do prison ministry. I've run small groups on like faith and fitness. I was on the, or am on the prayer team at my church, served on the greeting team, and even have done ministry internships through my church. So God shined through it all and never left my side. I just had to find my way back to him.
Jamie, we're grateful you're here.
Thank you.
That is a lot.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So it sounds like for you, it maybe was a sort of longer gradual process
Oh,
of learning. What do you mind sharing maybe some of those more pivotal moments?
mhm,
You touched on a lot of those, but
mhm.
was there a moment that just like this? What changed? What finally changed for you?
I love when people ask me this question because I've been blessed to speak on a lot of different podcasts that are Christ centered. And I think that's one thing that gets to be a beautiful part of my testimony is that there wasn't one clicking aha moment. Because sometimes I feel like what shames people away from their relationship with God is they expect it to be this massive moment where it's like, no,
Yeah.
this is when it finally all made sense. It wasn't. Like I always joke and say, if like you imagine us as like sheep and God being our shepherd, I am literally that sheep that's like bouncing around and, oh, hey, here's a cliff. Let me go jump off it. And then I like bounce all the way down with all these bumps and bruises. And God just rolls his eyes and he grabs the hook and pulls me back up. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I learned that lesson, but let me go over here to this one. And so I think that it's refreshing to hear sometimes when people don't have that pivotal moment of where
Yeah.
it's just been like chipping away slowly and progressing me that allows me to continue to deepen that relationship and keep wanting more rather than just this massive outbreak where this was the day that everything in my life changed. Because there were a lot of those moments, but each moment has brought a different sense of realization and a different depth to my relationship with God. So it's a very long winded way to say I can't tell you one massive moment because there have been so many different points of that along the journey.
Okay. More of a sunrise
Yeah.
experience. I
Yes.
wonder if that's more of the rule and less of the exception. That seems to be the journey for most of us,
Yes.
which is hopeful because yeah, I have people in my life who they figured out their way of life sucks through
Yes.
hard experiences, and then they decide, well, what am I going to do now? And I can put in their ear a little bit. Well, how about a little bit of prayer? How about a little
Yep.
bit of scripture study? And they expect that. They kneel down, they prayed, and they're like, nothing happened. I
Mhm.
said, that was step one. Step two, pray again.
Yes.
Step three, pray again.
Yes.
It's this continual process, more of a sunrise. So it's good to hear some backup on that.
Yes. I have I do this all the time. Whenever I speak, do anything, I always want to make sure that I can leave value. And there is a book that I read recently by Gene Edwards, and it's called The Prisoner. I believe it's called The Prisoner in the Third Cell. But the overall like synopsis to take away from the book is that are you willing to believe and follow a God who does not meet your expectations? And I think that's so powerful because with what you just said, wait a minute, Christian, I sat down and I prayed. Why didn't anything happen? That was your
Yeah.
expectation. We don't serve a conditional God that just because you prayed, that means he answers. We serve a good God who loves us and knows what's best for us. And so that's the true meaning of faith. Are you going to still believe and pray more and pray again and die of your flesh every single moment of every single day? And have faith in a God who is not going to meet your expectation. I think
I
that's
love
the true
that.
meaning of faith.
I love
Yeah.
that. And I think that your life is a kind of a testament to that because you had maybe rightfully so many reasons to just say, life is horrible. There is no God. Why would he let these things happen? But here you are on the
Mm.
other side of that.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Yeah. I, so you mentioned that your home wasn't necessarily ideal.
Mm.
Have, has that changed now that you're on the other side of this storm? Do you have a relationship with your parents at this point?
1000%. And my mom has always been my rock throughout all of it. And what's been really cool, and although it's been very hard, I do feel there's a lot of generational curses that I've been able to break because of that. But I think the beautiful thing too is, and again, this is where my recovering Catholic side comes out. And I'm so grateful that I was still able to have that concept of rule and understanding and work ethic and do this, not that, this black and white mentality. However, it got to the side of the pendulum where everything was so legalistic that,
Hmm.
like, I never, and I know so many Catholics who feel the same way too, or very strict religion, they don't understand grace.
Yeah. Little
And,
Pharisaical almost too far.
yeah, yeah, and so it's you even the Lord's Prayer. If we want God to forgive us, we have to go forgive others too, because we're just as much as sinners as what they are. And being on the other side of it, like sometimes even when I share my story, I feel bad because I never want to give my my bloodline a bad reputation of it because they were people who were hurting and were trying to navigate grief and doing the best that they could. Like I put myself in their shoes, like here they are maybe
Yeah.
potentially unhappy with themselves and trying to learn how to figure out a relationship together while trying to raise three kids. There's a whole lot of things that are happening at once. And so the grace of they're allowed to mess up too. And
Yeah.
deep down to my core, I know that it's not like that was their intention to be like, you know what, Jayme, we're going to do this to you because this is how we want you to feel. And this is how we want you to grow up. And this is how we want you to view life. I know that would never be the case and what their intentions were. They were hurt people trying to get through hard times just as much as what I would have been. So,
And maybe just
yes, we
doing
have
their
a great
best.
relationship. Yes,
I'm
exactly.
glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yes.
My, my upbringing wasn't necessarily ideal either. However, one thing, do you have kids?
No, I
Uh,
do not.
so I've got a couple of kids, and one thing that having children has helped me understand, it's just helped me understand that like parents in general are all just trying. Like we're all just trying so hard
Exactly.
and we fail so hard in many occasions, but I really do love my kids and I really try to be a
Mhm.
good dad, but I know I let them down. I know I
Yeah.
fail. And I know that most parents to varying degrees are just trying most of us are just trying our best. So
Mhm.
it's easier to have it's a hard situation to be a kid with a parent who it's you could do better, but inside they're probably thinking the same thing. I know I need to do better. So there's some grace and some compassion there.
Absolutely.
Um, you mentioned you've been able to break generational curses, and I always think anytime I hear that, which by the way, congratulations, that is an incredible achievement. But I always think of that scripture that goes something like, "And I will visit the sins of the fathers on the heads of the children for 7 generations," something like that, and that's what I think it refers to. And the easy go-to is alcoholism, right? You have a father who drinks, and then the kids are like, "Okay, this is life, so we drink," and then it just continues down this generational line, so that's that curse being passed on, not necessarily that God is like, "If you sin, I'm gonna make sure your kids pay for it," but it's, "If I sin, I'm gonna make sure my kids pay for that." They're gonna feel that in their lives, and so you being able to remove that is that's something else. Um, wh so what specifically, like, what generational curses have you been able to pull yourself out of?
Oh, there is so many. So alcoholism is one of the biggest ones.
Okay.
And even just in general, the relational baggage and the bitterness and the judgment that has been held within my whole entire family that even has I even swear to the relationship because I have a sister 7 years older and then another one is 11 years older than me. So definitely the
Okay.
baby.
Big spread, yeah.
Yes, but my oldest sister and I swear in so many ways, I always felt like our relationship was like Jacob and Esau. There's
Okay.
just
You didn't get
always
along?
been this competition and this battle and just trying to prove something and all of that. And it's just, like, what are we fighting for? This isn't what it's about. It doesn't have to be this way. And just again, even just the fact of I tend to be the pit bull in my family. And before stepping into my spiritual gifts, I did not use it well, where I use my voice to destroy people. And I very much lived out that same way that so many of like my parents and the way they were raised and all of that of just these standards that were expected or just naturally continued on. And I'm just every time I get to go back and see them, I'm like, no, this is my chance. And they're all very faith driven. They also go to Catholic church and everything, but it's no, but this is how we're gonna do it differently. This is what's not gonna happen. I'm gonna lead the way in showing forgiveness and to be able to break that we don't have to keep cultivating this sin over and over again for our kids now experience and all of that. Yeah, there's been a lot of layers to that
H how
that
how do you
continue to
do that?
happen.
If somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, "I'm drinking because my parents drink, and that's just a way of life," like, how do you break something like that? How do you come out of that?
You can't do it without God. I actually, through our church, we're doing a Discover course, like all digging deep into the Sermon of the Mount. And what's really cool is that like you need to get to that point of recognizing that it isn't something that you can do alone. You need to let God circumcise your heart. Like it's a heart problem. It's not an alcohol problem. It's a heart problem.
Hmm.
Because what is it that people are turning to alcohol for? Even throughout scripture, it references like those who are miserable and those who want to be fools are going to overconsume alcohol. Like they're going to choose something of this world to try to lean into to avoid the very thing that's going to set them free, which is fully giving their heart to Jesus. So it's you can't like or like people who are struggling with like porn addictions or those who are using food, anything, right? No matter or like lust in relationships, like all of those things, like it's a heart posture. And so it's you can't do it on your own. And I think that's such a frustrating answer to hear at first, but how beautiful to be like, no, like it's gonna be hard, but it doesn't have to be hard when I go to the source who created me who can and knows and will do all things. Like, Lord, remove this from me. Let me continue to focus so much on you that this can no longer have power over me anymore. You help me break these chains because I can't do it alone.
I love that. It's not an alcohol problem, it's a heart problem. And the way I frame that in my mind, and this from the brief encounter with the podcast, is like I see our life as a hierarchy of values and beliefs
Mhm.
and philosophies and people and ideologies. And then an easy way to think of that is like a pyramid. But another way is I actually like to think of it like an altar. And it's we're building our lives as an altar to our God, whatever that God is. And so alcoholism is right here, and right here is my career, and then right here's my family, and then but here's all these other things I stack on top of it, and that postures our life towards whatever God we worship, and that orients us. And so sometimes we're just worshiping the wrong God. And so to get rid of that alcohol problem, it's maybe we need a reordering of those values in our lives. And the other part I like about the altar is on altars you make offerings and sacrifices. And what do you offer? You offer your will and your obedience. And what do you sacrifice? You sacrifice your whole soul to hopefully to the right God, to Jesus. But that is a beautiful way to see that. Thank you. The last thing you threw so much at me, and my mind was like, I
I
want to
know,
know more
sorry.
about this
That's
and
what
this and this.
when I filled out that form for you, I was like, oof, I don't even like I need to condense this somehow because there's a lot.
The other thing you mentioned that I think is so relevant is grace. And grace, I think, is sometimes very vague, very abstract. We have a hard time understanding it. How do you I would like 2 questions. How do you understand grace? And then pragmatically, how can we use that? How can that be of a benefit to us?
Mhm. Great questions. Another book recommendation. A mentor gave this to me and it wrecked my life in the best way possible.
'Kay.
It is The Ragamuffin Gospel by Brennan Manning. And I do believe he used to be a priest and then walked
Mhm.
away from more of the religion aspect of it. But like for me, whenever I would hear something on the lines of grace, or to me, grace was like a foreign language where I'm like, I can read it in the dictionary. It does nothing in my soul. Like,
Yeah.
very, like you mentioned, like very much living like a Pharisee. Like I was so obsessed with the law of do this or you're going to hell, which is a great place to start because it's better than doing the wrong thing because you have a moral code you're standing on. But I'm a big believer that we need water to survive, but water can also kill us. Too much of anything can become a bad
You could
thing.
be drowning in it, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So learning how to balance out the pendulum of that where grace doesn't mean it's your get out of jail free card, right? That doesn't mean it can be like, oh, I'm gonna go run naked down the streets and do a whole bunch of drugs and kill people because God loves me anyway.
Then I'll repent later, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. That's again on the you're being too licentious and what God has done for you. But again, I think it all boils down to that heart posture of knowing that, and I have to keep giving kudos to at Red Rocks Austin, Deborah and Jeff Newport. They're the husband and wife who are running this Discover course that we're doing.
Ok
They've even been talking about that sense of grace where it's even when, like with on the Sermon of the Mount, that you killing somebody is equal to the crime of you talking bad about somebody because you're devaluing them as a human and putting yourself up on a pedestal as if you're more righteous than them. Where when we should be aiming for righteousness, it's towards God, not self. So I think in the form of grace is learning that you are a broken human, just like I am. And I still every single day need my savior just as much as what you do. And so when the only God can judge me comment comes out, but where's that heart postured? Are you using that to try to put yourself up on the throne that you're doing better than somebody else and then you're devaluing them? That's not coming from a space of grace, obviously. But if it's like, hey, I can speak truth into you and I can love you despite you messing up because we all mess up. And if I can be forgiven, so can you. I think that approach in understanding grace is what I have learned how to do. Or if somebody hurts me, it doesn't have anything to do with me. It's probably because they're hurting or there's something that they're projecting on me that they're experiencing. And I
Yeah.
can still love them through that. That doesn't mean I have to sit back and take it, right? Again, all the way over, but I can still love you. Because just like Jesus did on the cross, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. That's what I got for you.
So perhaps if I'm running naked through the streets, shooting up heroin, perhaps I'm not worshiping God.
That would be probably the case. But
The
as
the
loving my neighbor, that doesn't mean that I sit there and I judge you or I go make
Yeah.
fun of you.
And I think that I could worship loving my neighbor. That's not a bad value. In fact, I think it's a Christian value, but when that is the focus of my life, it's not the right target, and sin means miss the target, and it's not quite the right target. You could worship charity. I could worship grace, for example, or I could worship the
Mhm,
church, and I think a lot of people end up worshiping their church.
mhm,
It's like whatever the church says, that's what I'll do regardless of
Yep.
if that's in line. And so we can have good things at the top of our faith hierarchy, but there's only one thing at the top of that faith hierarchy
Oh,
that leads us back to God,
yeah.
and that's Jesus. The
Yeah.
way I've been trying to develop maybe a more mature view of grace. So tell me what you think about this. Here's what I've come up with. I think that it's like, one, we're all saved by grace, which thank God for Jesus.
Mhm.
I'm so grateful for that. But two, I think there's also this enabling this progression. Grace allows us just to get better and overcome things like generational curses. I think that's all grace too. I think that all
Mhm.
helps us to, like,
Yeah.
on this upward spiral, to continue to improve. And that's what repentance is. It's, oh, that wasn't quite right. So I course corrected, and you're just continually course
Yeah.
correcting. So the way I see it, it's Jesus is the sun and we're a flower, and the sun is always there. His grace is always there. And that sun is always coming down in its fullness, completely, totally, fully.
Yeah.
But as a flower, we can turn away from that. Like, it's always there,
Yeah.
but we need to turn towards it. And the sun moves across the sky, and then we
Yeah.
need to continue turning towards it to receive all of that. And then as we do, we grow. And I think that's the saving part of grace, just it being there all the time. And that us turning to face it that's the growth piece where, yeah, we do need to do things. And that's that
Yeah.
kind of faith without works is dead. We don't do works so that we can earn grace, but and this is the piece I struggle defining, but because we love Jesus, it's like those works follow. If we orient that altar, that pyramid, our heart towards Jesus, then our works follow that, and then we continue to grow. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
So where my brain went as you described it that way, and I'm probably going to butcher this, so people Google
All
if you
right.
need to. If you need to Google it, and don't take this as gospel, don't worship this
Yeah.
example because I'm probably going to mess it up. But I read one time the concept of grace, and it was like this scenario where this gentleman was a judge, like in a court of law, and his son had committed some massive crime.
Yeah.
So the son walks into the courtroom, and here's his dad having to make the choice on how to judge him, right? Technically, you need to go to jail and you need to pay X amount of money for the crime that you committed. However, since the dad is the judge, he pays the debt that the son owes and says, "Sin no more. Like, I love you. You are forgiven. I will pay your debt. I don't have to, but I'm going to because I love you. And my ask is that you just continue to move forward and sin no more." Similar to the story of the woman who gets pulled out at the festival
Yeah.
for being in relation with a guy. And so, like, the whole point to that story, though, is that that's where the grace of God comes in, is that we are sinners sitting in a courtroom that should be judged a certain way. But because he loved us so much, he paid for us. That doesn't mean, hey, I want you, you're off the hook. Go keep doing that very thing. Repent, turn towards me, and keep going. So I like that analogy.
Oh,
Long
thank you.
story long.
No. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll jump ahead a little bit. So I want to know more about what you're doing today. Like, how do you integrate your faith into, first, let's talk about what you're doing today. And then I just want to know, like, how does faith integrate into, like, your orientation towards God? How does that drive you to do what you're doing? So tell us a little bit more about your coaching. And the one I'm really excited about, actually, for whatever reason, I'm really excited to hear about the prison ministry that you do. I think that's so cool. So lay
Yeah.
it on me. Tell me about what you're
Yes.
doing.
So I'll start with that because that's all just voluntary.
Yeah.
That's just because I enjoy it. So yes, I get to be a part of the team through my church where we go out and we do ministry for the women in this prison here in Texas. We're working on getting into another prison, but we actually get to go out every single Saturday. We have a rotation of teams, but we get to go to the chapel of this very high security prison that has about 1,100 inmates, but on average, about 100 usually show up where they come down to the chapel and we get to do church service with them. And then we get to do small group with them afterwards. So we get to literally praise Jesus with them. And it's amazing because so many of these people found God while being in prison. Like, they were in witchcraft, they had done all these wrongs. And sitting there in a jail cell is where they were able to finally meet Jesus.
That is incredible. Is there an example? Is there a story that you've seen, you've witnessed this?
Yeah. So one of them in particular was a woman that I got to chat with, and what is it like being outside of prison and going to church? I was like, "What do you mean?" And I was really into drugs. Like, this girl's loaded in tat. And I was really into witchcraft. And she goes, "I made some really bad decisions. And now I'm here in prison." And I found God in here, right? Like, in the darkest place of my life, like, this is where he met me. And there's another good book, 27 Summers by Robert Olivier. And he was a gentleman who actually went into prison and ended up getting tried as an adult, even though it happened when he was still a teenager. And he spent 27 years in prison. But God, not only did he find him, but God continued to work through his heart. He was able to get out, and now he is speaking and going back into prisons and helping more inmates find Jesus. And I will tell you, there are so many women in that prison that are in there for life, and they are more on fire for the Lord than I will ever be.
Yeah.
And it's just true of, again, going back to that concept of grace. Like at the end of the day, nobody wakes up one day, you know what? I'm going to go harm another human, and I'm going to go to prison because that's what I want to do today. No, life happened. And that can be any of us. Like even with what I just shared of my story in a very short way, like I could easily be in prison for all of the bad decisions I made.
Yeah.
God had other plans, that God protected that, but like that could be me. And would I want people to judge me or not love me or look down on me as if I'm not worthy of finding a God who loves me unconditionally because of my mistakes? No, that's not how our God works. So it's just a beautiful reminder every time that I get to go that, like, for one, I'm grateful for the life that God has given me, but I'm grateful for this opportunity to, on a regular basis, go face to face with people who deserve the same amount of love. And a lot of people just don't give it to them because they do. And they're amazing.
One of the things you mentioned, and I think this is something you sent in, but you mentioned, I think it was finding peace and joy in chaos.
Mhm.
One, your early life sounds a lot like that. But two, these women in prison, it's a dark place. But it
Mhm.
sounds like even in the darkest place that they could be, there's still peace and joy.
Mhm. Even in the scriptures, that's what Paul talks about, right? To live as Christ, to die is gain. That like he was sitting in prison, and joy is a
Yeah.
gift from God, not a gift of the world. So joy is joy in a sound mind, peace, joy, a sound mind. Those are all gifts and fruits of the spirit that we have right here today that we don't have to earn, that we have to wait to have happen. They are ours for the taking right now if we choose to focus on God. It's there.
Yeah.
And yeah, these ladies, because man, we'll put the like the worship that starts before service. They have their hands raised and they are praising and so on fire for the Lord more than the people that I see at my church, which or anywhere that I go. And it's interesting because they'll even say that. Think about it. Although it's an unfortunate situation, like they have nothing but time to spend with God. They don't have to worry about the stresses of the outside world
Mm.
where they can meditate on his scripture. Yes, they have to watch their back because prison is dangerous, right? There's different like gangs that are against you or they want to just come at you in the wrong way. Like you do have to like watch your back. It's not obviously sunshine and rainbows, but like they they have nothing else to give other than their hearts to Jesus if they choose
Yeah.
to. So
Do you
yeah,
find that somebody who's in jail with limited freedom like that, or prison rather, and they're born again, they have this experience with God. What, what changes for them in their prison life?
I think the same, like, it's not any different than somebody who would be born again out in the real world. Think about the light and the way you show up of being
Mm.
a joyful presence to those around you. And I think that again, it is a different circumstance, but it's still all of the root thing. Like we are all here to be the light of the world and the salt of the world in a dark, broken, fallen world. Like that is our job as Christians. And so when we choose to give our life to Christ, no matter if it's in a jail cell, if it's in your cubicle at work, if it's in your own home, like you have a choice to show up in the presence of the Lord and be that light in a world that so desperately needs it.
Yeah. Perhaps they shine brighter because it's a bit darker in prison.
Yes.
I have a brief experience along those lines. So I served a mission for my church a few years ago. I was in Honduras, and it's a third world country, dirt floors, and we were out knocking on doors all day this one day. We scheduled some appointments, they all fell through, so we had no plan. So we spent the entire day knocking and nobody would let us in. And so which is pretty, it's just disappointing because I'm there to tell people about Jesus, and nobody wants it. So we knock doors all day, and then Honduras it's just like a dry season and a wet season for 6 months. And so
Mhm.
half the season you're wet with sweat, the other half you're just like covered, just soaking wet. Your backpack fills up with water, kind of rain. And it was one of those rainy seasons. And so it gets dark, it's just raining torrentially, and we're walking through the mud. And so we're covered in mud and we're wet. And so we knocked on one of our friends' houses who was down there. They let us in briefly and they gave us some lemonade. And lemonade down there is a bit different.
Of course.
It's not like soda pop. It's like they squeeze lemons and then they pour some sugar into it. And I hated it. It was the worst. And I just wanted to be done with it and get out, and it was this big glass, so I just chugged it, and we go back out into the rain, and then it's cold, it's wet, and then I just get sick, and I start throwing up in the street. So I was just miserable. By all accounts, like, I was just absolutely miserable, physically, mentally, I was down, and there was just a fire in my chest, and I just, like, to me, that was, "This is it. I am exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to be doing, and I feel so much joy and peace," and I was so happy, and that was a testament to me that it's like what is it Jesus says? Something like, "The joy I give is not of this world," something like that. But that's exactly it. You can experience chaos and darkness and hell in your life, but if you follow Jesus, his burden is light, and
Mhm.
he'll let you know, and you'll feel it in your chest. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, that was the experience I had that seemed to go along with that.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yep. It is always there. Always there. It's just on
Yeah.
whether we choose to turn towards that or not. I love that. Yeah.
Okay. So you're volunteering in prisons,
Yeah.
which, by the way, I would love to do that at some point. Do you just, like, show up to a prison and
Each state is super different, especially with us since we're like an affiliation going in. Like we have
Mhm.
to go through actual like training through the state of Texas and
Right.
know like what we're allowed to do, what we're not. You have to dress a certain way. You have to like make sure your background checks, fingerprints, all that type of stuff is good. And then we are affiliated through our church program, but there's a lot of different organizations too that you can latch on to. I know God Behind Bars is one of them, but there's a lot of other church organizations where you would be able to
Okay.
potentially latch on and like go and volunteer, but usually there is a process to get to that point.
Yeah, some
Yeah,
training, because somebody
yeah,
could Google it and find a way to volunteer.
yeah,
Okay,
10,
great.
10 recommend.
Tell me about your other businesses that you got going on. You have a
Yeah.
lot going on.
Yes. So yeah, primarily what I do is as I mentioned, I'm a mindset coach. And
Yeah.
so all my coaching is virtual and it's all one-to-one and it's connecting the dots, looking backward from my entire journey and everything that I've been through. One of the biggest things that I learned was I was doing everything for love and not from love. And I was wondered why I was so miserable. I was burning out, chasing things of this world. I obviously am very strong in my faith, but my coaching business isn't just for Christians. And quite literally, in some ways, the opposite, because many of the people that I've been able to coach, I've coached people who are atheists, people who don't go to church, who have a lot of church hurt, where I've been able to bring them to Jesus through my coaching. But the biggest thing is those people who are struggling with burnout, those people who are keep constantly chasing these fixes, they're pouring into their jobs and then the success doesn't feel as good as what they thought it was going to. They're pouring into all these relationships around them, but they feel like nobody is there to pour into them. They're sitting here feeling, I don't even know who I am and what I'm doing, and I'm burning out on life. What do I do? That's where I come in and I can help them retrain and rewire their brain where it's, as I mentioned, nobody's broken. It's not my job to fix them, but I like to treat the brain as if it's a muscle, just like you would in the gym. Where if
Mm,
we want to strengthen it, we have to practice it. We need repetition. We have to show up. We have to stop doing old things and we need to
yeah.
create new habits. So on a high level, I help people with boundaries, communication, goal setting, time blocking, all of that good jazz. But
Okay.
then on the deeper side, it's uprooting limiting beliefs and default systems and habits and learning how to unlearn those and rewire new ones.
Yeah, if you have one off the top of your head, I'd love to hear about who is it, who is a person that had a problem that you were able to help successfully? What does that look like? How does their story unfold?
So I'm going to give two examples here
Okay.
because a lot of times people think that they have to be in a complete spiral and at their wits' end to start working with me. And that's not the case. So I'm going to share this version first. One of my clients, she's in New Jersey. She's a coach, she's a teacher, all things health and wellness. Like she pours into all these other people. She is one of the fittest people that I know, thinks very positive, all of that. But she just needed somebody to be her blind spot because she was becoming like overwhelmed by just everything being here and the anxiousness of trying to do all these things and it not working or feeling like she couldn't get to the next level and all this stuff. Things in her life were good, but she just wasn't really experiencing peace or just clarity on what she was supposed to do next. So I got to be a part of that journey with her of like, okay, hey, these are some of those default belief systems that you're not even aware of that are leading the way on making you think that this is how life is supposed to be or how it's not. Let's call BS on that and let's start to find a new way to approach that situation. And I give tactical strategies on how you can start changing that thought process, different ways to set goals, different challenges to make that happen. So that's like more of just, that's somebody who's very just much invested in always wanting to personally develop and become the best version of
Yeah.
themselves. As a
Okay.
coach, I'm a big believer in always having a coach. I need someone to be my blind spot and to sharpen me so I can go pour into other people. So that's one side. More on the deeper side. Let's see. So many different ones are
Just
coming to
running through
mind.
the list.
I know. Okay. One of my favorites was a gentleman that I worked with 5 years ago, atheist. Actually, he also was a coach as well. A lot of very big vices that he was choosing to find happiness in. Ones I'll just for, I don't know if he would ever listen to this, but just private sex clubs, doing a lot of
Okay.
things,
He,
multiple women into polygamy, all those things, but was
he's
a
deep.
very miserable soul, struggles with just alcohol and drugs leading the way in that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think men tend to break down and cry on my calls far more than what the females do,
Why
which
do you think
makes
that
me,
is?
because we live in a world where men aren't allowed to express emotions because it means they're
Yeah.
weak. And so when they have a safe space that they get to do that,
The dam
um,
breaks.
yeah. But yeah, I worked through with him of being like, especially he was a very intelligent guy, but it was me getting to be his soundboard and be like, okay, this isn't working. So let's really break down why. And why is it that you feel this way? Why is this that you think that this is true? How can we navigate this and how can we prove that this isn't how that really went down? And so I would challenge him. We would work on consistency of new ways of thinking and how to go about his day and how he was spending his time and how he was able to experience fulfillment and joy in his life versus all of the reasons and the ways that he wasn't. So we just shifted the focuses on a lot of different things and rebuilt some new things to excite him to work towards. And I actually interviewed on his podcast a little over a year ago, and it was really cool because he shared his testimony. He's quite literally, Jayme saved my life because
Oh,
I was in a very dark place and she was able to see something in me and support me and encourage me into a version of me that I didn't even know existed. So that was that
you
one.
did some good in the world for this gentleman.
Yes.
Holy cow. And he's stuck with it. He's on the up and up.
Yes. Yes.
Oh
And
my
it was
goodness.
actually really cool because about 3 months ago, he just randomly reached out to chat and I had a chance to just like genuinely just talk with him about Jesus.
Yeah.
So still praying on that situation, but he's been really open to just letting me share my perspectives on that because he is definitely not somebody who he's not a bad person. He has an amazing heart, one of the most genuine humans I've ever met, but just
Yeah.
doesn't believe that there's a God. So being able to continue to nurture that relationship even long after we work together to still potentially connect him to Jesus someday will be really cool.
Yeah. I think people like him have so much potential, like so much to give, and they just don't know where to go to get what they need. And being completely biased, like we know, it's like
But
Jesus said,
what's
I'm the
sad is
way.
even people, even Christians, they know and they still don't
And they
go.
still don't. Yeah, we still don't sometimes. And
Exactly.
that's a great segue, actually. Jamie, what are some things that you prioritize over faith? Accidentally on purpose, sometimes here and there.
So easy. Do you do Enneagram? Are you familiar with
I
the
actually, yes,
Enneagram?
I've done the Enneagrams.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a three
So,
wing two.
okay. Does not surprise me. I do very well with threes. I'm an Enneagram 8, which makes me the
I actually
challenger.
doesn't surprise me either. You
Yes.
seem to be kind of
So,
lying.
yes. Yes. So, the detriment to that, and also just because of my upbringing, my survival mode was that nobody had my back and I had to do it all. So many ways where I fall short with my faith is that it takes until many times that I am kicking and screaming and I'm exhausted for me to finally surrender and let God be God. Because I'm like, but God, I feel like I need to perform for you and I need to do all of these things. And if I do all these things, then you'll do that for me. That's one of the main things that I cripple to is me trying to control everything, where even
Hmm,
sometimes I misconstrue, even though it's with the good intentions, I start to serve the kingdom of me instead of the kingdom of heaven.
I like that.
Yes, that would be one way. And then another one I was actually just talking with one of my mentors this morning about. I am 33 years old, never been married, don't have any kids. And there are many times that I idolize a relationship. I've only had 2 serious relationships in my life, but I've lived alone my entire adult life. And so it's very easy for me to feel like even from the kingdom perspective of desiring a husband and God wants me to have a husband, but now all of a sudden I'm idolizing and worshiping a relationship over the ultimate relationship because that's just a way of the flesh. So I would say those are probably the 2.
Yeah, that I think we all struggle with the first one for sure. So I know what I'm doing. I'm independent. I can do this. And then we fall flat and they're like, all right, God, pick me up again. Let's
Yep.
try this.
Yep.
So yeah, the second one I haven't experienced personally. So I met my now wife when we were
Mhm.
16. So I was actually it was a blind date. I was her first date. I was her first kiss. And then we had a high school love story. And then we both served missions for our churches. We came back. We got
I
married.
love that.
We'll be married 10 years in January. So in a couple of months.
And
And I got to tell you, like next to my relationship with God, there's nothing I treasure more than my wife. She's just
that's how it
sh
should
sh
be.
she's just like my heart and the light of my home. And I love her. I love her to death.
It's amazing.
And I want that for you. You
Oh,
you can have that, and I hope that in the near future, that's out there because it's when done and you've witnessed it, I've witnessed it, it can be done wrong, but when done right, it can be so beautiful, so
I
beautiful.
appreciate that. And with that too, since this can now be like what the 3rd or 4th book that I drop.
Yeah, you're well
Again,
read.
yes, very much. I love reading. Actually, one of my pastors wrote this book. It's called Single Today, and his
Nice.
name is Ryan Weckerman. And he's a single pastor. And I think, especially too, within the church, again, the way of the world. And yes, because God does want us to, he did create woman for man and all of that. But we live in a culture now, again, where we fall more in love with the idea of marriage than what the mission of marriage is. And so many people end up missing out on the opportunity to draw closer to God because they're so obsessed of being in relationship with another human and getting married. And so God and I have went round and round many of times. And there have been many dark moments throughout my life. But what I have learned to grow and understand is that if and when God does have a husband for me, that is fantastic. Because that means that I now have somebody to partner with and glorify the kingdom far better than what I could than if I was by myself. However, if God does not meet my expectation of having a husband, I'm not going to serve him any differently. I'm not going to love him any less. And I am not of any less value on this earth in the way I show up because I don't have a husband. So if there is anything if there is any single people who are watching this, that's the encouragement that I want to give you because it's so frustrating as a single person, real talk, to have people say, oh, but your
I'm so
Boaz
sorry.
is right around the corner. No, no, you're okay. But it's just sometimes like that can feel really discouraging to hear people who have what we desire. So we least expect it or it's coming. You don't know that. It may not. Like Paul was single, right? And even there's parts within scripture that talk about him with that. And so I definitely by no means am saying in the intention that you said something wrong because you didn't. But I've been that
Yeah,
bitter person in some of those seasons. And so the encouragement that I want to give anybody if they are single is that like a marriage isn't something that's going to define you and all of a sudden mean that your life is going to be awesome. Because although
yeah,
you and your wife sound like you have the ultimate goal of what the kingdom relationship could be, marriage is hard because you're still having to sacrifice for another human where those things that maybe you would have done differently if you didn't have to serve and love another human. And that's the part I think sometimes that as a single person that we forget is that there is still a lot of hardships within marriage. It isn't all sunshine and rainbow, even if it is the perfect candidate for you. Like it is
yeah,
always going to be work and constant proof that you're going to sacrifice your needs for somebody else's. And so just knowing and trusting that like you are still insanely loved and valued. And if and when you are meant to have a husband, great, enjoy it. But if not, you still have such purpose in this world. And the fulfillment and joy God has for you is yours for the taking now, not when all of a sudden you get married.
yeah. I love that. I think like that paragraph that is the definition of worship. It's like, regardless, I'm going to build
Yep.
this altar and I'll give you my will and my whole soul. I
Yep.
love that. Okay, we'll wrap up here. There was more I wanted to talk to you about, but I think my brain is breaking at this point.
You'll have to bring me back again. That's what I
We'll
hear.
have to have you back. Well, so I'll ask. 2 more questions. One
Okay.
just being a short synopsis.
Mhm.
Assuming, and the way I always think about this again is that altar. Assuming you're building an altar to God with your life,
Mhm.
down the road in the future, what do you hope that altar looks like? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do with your life to worship God?
I know you said make it quick. What I
Yeah, no,
have
this is a
learned
tough one to make quick.
no, what I have learned in the last if you would have asked me this a month ago, I wouldn't have given you the same answer. I promise you that.
Okay, it's evolving.
Yes, because God created us to be human beings, not human doings. There is no amount of me forfeiting all of myself and serving the altar to the fullest that is going to make him love me more than what he does right now. So for me, the fact that I have my heart postured on wanting to do what God wants me to do, and the fact that I get the opportunity to even bring a couple of his children back home, that's all that matters. So it looks exactly as it does now, of me being able to surrender myself to love the Lord first and foremost and rest in that. And then secondly, have the opportunity to bring his children home.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll end with this then. People are going to want more of you. How do they get
Cool.
it? Where do they find you?
Yes, feel free to cyber stalk me. I
Yeah.
am Jayme with no eyes. So Jayme. You can follow me on Instagram, which is Jayme the Coach. I have my own podcast called Make Time for Your Mind with Coach Jayme. You can follow me on Facebook, all the things. If there's
Okay.
ever anything I can do for you, just message me through one of those platforms and we can talk from there. But other than that's how you can find me.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time. I think that you're a light, and I'm grateful to be able to experience some of that. Keep doing what you're doing. It's a
Appreciate
beautiful
that.
thing.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Okay.
Thanks for joining this episode of The Holy Rebellion. We'll see you next week.